4th. The City Council work session will be conducted virtually with council members conferencing in the City Hall. The public can view the meeting live by going to www.raymore.com/video. And before we start tonight's agenda, I'd like to ask you all for a moment of silence for Officer Mosier, who was killed in the line of duty yesterday in Overland Park. Thank you all. If you'd keep he, his family, and the Overland Park Police Department in your prayers, we'd appreciate it. And our first item this evening will be the Raymore Fleet Vehicles, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. And I will turn it immediately over to Mr. Eakey for this agenda item.
Thank you, sir. As you may noticed, as you've called in, Mr. Fearborn is not sitting in his usual seat. To my right, your all's left, is Brandon Scott with Enterprise Fleet Management. He has been an integral part in putting together the proposal we're going to be talking about tonight and giving you kind of a high-level overview of what we are looking to do with our Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund. I want to start with kind of giving you a brief timeline of how we got to today and the proposal that we have before you. Back in August of 2019, Mr. Fearborn had asked me and several other department heads to really take a deep dive audit into the Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund, or the VERP, to really begin to look at ways that we could save money on our fleet that kind of span among several different departments. So there's the administrative department with several vehicles, the police department, public works, parks, that all have, and development services that all have fleet vehicles. As part of this, we were looking to see, one, that we had vehicles that were up to date, that were being used efficiently, and that also were meeting the standards of just, a high quality vehicle for our staff members to use. As we started to look through the program, one of the things that we really touched on was we currently were purchasing the vehicles through the government contract, the Sourcewell Cooperative Purchasing Agreement. And within that agreement and that contract, there was an option that instead of purchasing, which we had done as a city for many years, there was an option within that government cooperative contract to begin a leased fleet maintenance program with Enterprise. And so we invited Enterprise in and have had a number of conversations with them, not only Enterprise from a financial standpoint, but have also allowed our department heads to really kind of take a number of opportunities to ask questions, to really dive into their own individual fleets. And even at one point, I think we had Brandon crawling around inside one of the police vehicles to ensure that they could deliver the exact specifications and specs that they would need for that fleet. And so we've really taken a fine-tooth comb to everything over this project to put together this proposal tonight. And so what I want to do is just briefly have Brandon introduce himself and Enterprise Fleet Management before we really get into how this is going to affect not only the VERP, but also our overall budget in the coming years.
Have you got your microphone, the green light on? There you go.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate y'all having me here this evening. Again, my name is Brandon Scott with Enterprise Fleet Management. Been with Enterprise for 12 years now. Grew up in Independence. I went to college at Mizzou. Since then, I've relocated 6 times with Enterprise: Columbia to Wichita, Kansas, to Manhattan, Kansas, to Wichita, Kansas, to Columbia, back to Wichita, and now to Kansas City. So, plan's always been to move around as much as possible before kids started school, and about a year and a half ago, we started thinking, where do we want to be? And Spotting our fleet management division opened up, and here I am. So we partner with a whole bunch of different municipalities across the United States, over 1,000 government entities currently. Most recently, started partnerships with Saline County, Missouri, United Government, Wyandotte County, Leavenworth County, Kansas. So quite a bit across KC Metro and state of Missouri and Kansas as well. So partnering with government entities is kind of our bread and butter, and that's certainly keeping our division going for sure through all of COVID-19.
Thank you. And what really we're looking at for the fleet within the city of Raymore is, at the end of the day, we're looking to save money. Every year, the council looks at the vehicle and equipment replacement program through the annual budget. In the past, we have seen that, and what I used was this year's VERP 2020 numbers. We see that the various departments, so the administration department, development services, engineering, emergency management, police, streets, parks, and the water utilities all make transfers from their budgets into the VERP to essentially place a payment in lieu of purchasing a new vehicle. So this payment each year for a new vehicle in the future. In the past, we have been looking at vehicle replacement strictly on how old the vehicle is. And so within the VERP, we had outlined in the policy how many years the automobiles for police cars, how old those vehicles could be, or how old the pickup trucks could be before they would be replaced and cycled out of the system. Every year, the council would make that approval as part of that VERP portion of the budget. This past year, in the 2020, the fiscal year, the council approved a transfer of $416,172 for the future purchase of vehicles. As we're forecasting into the next year and looking at the next budget, the VERP is anticipated to be roughly $420,168. And these are costs that we expect to continue to go up as we purchase these vehicles on our own. On the next slide, that original number of the total funds that we are transferring from the individual departments to the VERP itself, that $408,000 of that represents the actual vehicles that we are purchasing in the future through this fund. So the VERP also purchases lawnmowers, the street sweeper, some other vehicles that Enterprise won't be taking on. But if we look at just future vehicle purchases, we are anticipating a transfer of roughly $408,000 plus an additional maintenance cost of $68,000. And so in FY21, we're looking at a total fleet maintenance budget of roughly $476,820. As we've been looking at our fleet and we've been looking at the individual vehicles and what the comparable would be, apples to apples of purchasing the vehicles versus leasing the vehicles, we were able to realize that in year one, just in the first year, so this next fiscal year, we would actually be able to realize a savings of roughly $64,952 based solely on the lease payments of the vehicles that Enterprise recommends we replace in that first year, plus an additional VERP transfer that would continue to fund other vehicles that either Enterprise doesn't handle as part of the fleet maintenance or pieces of equipment like the lawnmowers and such, plus paying for the equipment to equip the police vehicles, placing decals on our parks vehicles and other items. And we're able to see that really we're only going to be able to spend with with the leasing program, we're going to be able to spend $411,000, again, seeing that $64,000 savings just in year one. Now, for the program to work year after year, we're going to see more vehicles go onto the leasing program, and so that VERP transfer of $170,000 will continue to go down with a lease payment being able to take over both the leasing of the vehicle as well as the maintenance of the vehicle. So Enterprise has a number of really kind of some interesting programs, but there are three that we're really focusing on and that we're going to be taking advantage of under the cooperative contract. The first is under the acquisition. Enterprise uses the existing cooperative agreement that we have to purchase vehicles and uses that purchasing power to essentially save money on the purchase of the vehicle, as well as getting a number of other incentives and discounts just by the fact that they are purchasing these vehicles on a national scale rather than on a more local scale. And so we're able to save money on the lease on the back end that way. Second, the additional item, or the really kind of, I think, kind of linchpin to this whole program is we'll no longer be looking at vehicles simply as by age based on how we would be replacing them. Not only would Enterprise be tracking the age of the vehicle, but they would also be looking at a number of other factors such as the depreciation of the vehicle, the market cost of the vehicle, or the replacement cost of that vehicle, and what we could see in the terms of equity of the vehicle. They're also going to be maintaining records on maintenance for the vehicle as well as fuel efficiency of the vehicle. And so now we have a number of factors that we can look at that are really going to be able to tell us the ideal time for replacing a vehicle rather than simply saying this is now a 7-year-old vehicle, it's time to replace. But we can see truly, is this vehicle costing us more money to keep within our fleet? That resource includes an online dashboard, and that's going to allow us to see vehicle by vehicle and department by department exactly how fuel efficient or how well maintained those vehicles within our fleet are. And then finally, the final kind of piece that really brings the whole package together is Enterprise's ability to sell the vehicles at a much higher price than what we typically can see on just a general used auto auction, which we're currently using. Enterprise can not only sell these to local dealers or to other companies that need fleet vehicles, but at the end of the day could even ship these vehicles across the United States and North America in order to really enhance what kind of equity. So, you know, in kind of a short term, while we're putting the payment forward through a lease payment, we see the equity of that vehicle come back to us at the end of the vehicle life or when Enterprise realizes there's a better vehicle out there. So in conclusion, really the 5 points that I feel make this proposal fairly strong moving forward. Not only do we get to continue to use the same cooperative contract that we have been using to purchase vehicles, but we're going to be able to realize a wider network of purchasing vehicles through that current contract. Second, we're going to have a much stronger managed maintenance and vehicle data tracking and a maintenance program that we will no longer see kind of a high spike in maintenance costs. Rather, we're going to have this flat maintenance cost that's going to be folded into that lease payment over time. Third, we're going to see a higher and more consistent resale value for each vehicle that cycles in and out of the fleet here at the city. And then finally, we're going to have newer, safer, and more efficient vehicles on our streets representing the city, which I think is really kind of at the heart of ensuring that we have a really well-maintained and well-managed VERP and fleet, is that we're going to have those safer vehicles out there for not only our individual or for our staff members, but also for the residents. And then finally, when I mentioned in year one, we would see roughly a savings of $64,000 in the VERP itself. If we were to project that out, and as part of the analysis that Enterprise did for our entire fleet, as we projected that out for the next 8 years, we were able to see that $64,000 was really just the start, but over the next 8 years, we could end up saving roughly $633,000 in total on the fleet itself by using the leased maintenance program and then using the resources that Enterprise has available to us. Fairly short presentation, but I wanted to kind of just, like I said, hit it at a high level, give kind of the broad strokes. What council will be seeing in the coming weeks will be the addendum or the amendment to that Sourcewell contract that we're currently using that would just include and bring Enterprise on board as part of that management component that we talked about. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Mike, are you intending to get council's approval after further consideration for this fiscal year, or are we looking at it as a budgetary item for next fiscal year?
The way that we had planned to kind of fold this in is to have the contract approved in this fiscal year, but with the ordering of vehicles and kind of the process that we would need to go through with Enterprise, this really wouldn't take effect until the next fiscal year. So the Sourcewell cooperative contract we would approve within the next month or so, and then this would really, the new vehicles would not come online until that FY21.
Okay.
And, Your Honor, the reason that we would be bringing this to the council in this manner is, of course, Enterprise, the Sourcewell contract is an intergovernmental contract like any other federal contract that we would be latching on to. Enterprise actually has that governmental contract, so obviously no bid requirements still within our purchasing policy, in fact our encouraged purchasing policy, but we would want to be taking the steps to outline the new way we are approaching that governmental contract by using Enterprise and their nationwide purchasing power, and also the component where when we're getting rid of vehicles, it is a dollar savings to us in getting rid of vehicles as opposed to putting them up for auction so that a cab driver can buy them in St. Louis, which is really where a lot of our vehicles end up going when we put them up to auction. They have a much wider network to achieve higher dollar savings in those trade-ins.
However, due to the way government contracts work on an annual basis, this is going to be an annual consideration, correct? The long-term consideration.
It's a long-term consideration. Most of our government contracts go well beyond 1 year.
Okay. All right, I would open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions of Mr. Icky or not?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Councilman Barber. I've
Yes,
got a question.
Mr. Barber.
I am absolutely not familiar with fleet leases, so just as kind of a general question, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but typically with just a private lease, personal lease, you have a residual at the end of the lease. You have a payment and a residual, and you turn the vehicle in, and then you can flip it over and go into a different lease. This kind of sounds like, does it have like a floating residual at the end? Because you're talking about worth more at the end if Enterprise can go out and wholesale the vehicle.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. Oh, we good? Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So the way our equity leases work is, yes, there is a residual to it. So let's say, go out and acquire a $30,000 truck and we write it down to a, $6,000 residual at the end. Typically with your dealership lease, you'll make your lease payments until the end. You turn it in, you wash your hands, and you're done. With ours is very different. So we may set it up on a 5-year term, $30,000 lease down to $6,000 residual. Well, we fast forward, call it 5 years, we turn around and sell that truck for $17,000. What happens is we give you the equity back from the sales price to the residual. So if the sales price is $17,000 less the $6,000 residual, that $11,000 goes back to City of Raymore in the form of equity. So then you with your new lease payment, and all of a sudden, instead of a $30,000 down to a $6,000, you've got a $19,000 down to a $6,000 residual because you're rolling that equity into the next vehicle. Thus, that's going to lower your monthly payments moving forward. And that's how we really start to see a lot of the savings over the course of time.
Yeah, and I could see that happening with admin cars, but not so much with marked patrol units.
Oh, for sure. No, that's a great point. We've discussed that, and they're very different uses. And so we've set up a different profile for the police vehicles than we had all public works and parks and those types of vehicles. They're just upfitted differently. They're driven differently. And so the police vehicles, will run to 100, 125, sometimes even 150,000 miles is typically what we'll target to be able to cycle in. Plus there's so much upfitting in those vehicles that it doesn't make sense to cycle them out any sooner. So it's typically a break-even proposition when it comes to the police fleet for most of our municipalities. But on the white fleet, if you will, the public works, parks and rec, administrative vehicles, that's where you really make up, the bulk of your savings.
Mr. Burke, did you have a question, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say, from a consumer side of it, I have actually purchased a vehicle, a resale from the fleet from Enterprise over in Kansas. They have a dealership, and we were very pleased with the type of pricing we were able to get, and the vehicle was very well taken care of. So I have the experience that they do have a lot of quality vehicles, and they move a lot of them. And I think ours was originally in Atlanta, and they moved it to Iowa, and then we got it delivered down to Kansas City, just same as CarMax or something like that. So is that perspective on the final end is they do make it easy for a buyer to buy a quality product once we are done with it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, I've got a follow-up question, Kevin Barber.
Mr. Barber.
Yeah, by the way, excellent presentation. And I like the handout material you gave us. One of the advantages I see of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, and one of the things it looks like we're trying to do is make our costs of maintaining or replacing our vehicles, something that we can, no surprises, we can plan for and have a consistency with. It seems to me that makes a lot of sense with the turnover that we have with our vehicles. And am I correct? And that's what one of the, not only the saving of the money, but just kind of knowing, having somebody manage our fleet for us, so to speak, when this turns over and all the vehicles are becoming a lease vehicle.
That is correct. And the additional advantage, not only of having, you know, the newer, safer, more efficient vehicles, is we are going to see immediately a reduction in those maintenance costs that we budget for every year, simply because we're going to have that newer fleet that we're going to have more data behind to make, you know, smarter decisions.
Mr. Circo, did you have something, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Brandon, with Farmers Insurance Group for 20 years, we maintain most of our fleet through you guys. We use exclusively in the central region here of 12 states. So I've had a lot of connections and meetings with you guys over the years, and you guys really are very well handled. The way your business is done, the way your fleets are done with us. We're very happy with you guys. I've been in a number of your states with some of your general managers when we've gone through this. We do a number of vehicles we did when I was there, and they still do. But you guys are a very magnificent company. You're great at what you do. I like the idea about the maintenance, having that on record, following that maintenance all the time on whatever vehicle it is, whether it's low maintenance city cars or it's high maintenance officer police cars, so we can keep track of that. So they do uphold, so we do get our value out of them, so they don't expire and go too many miles and you lose a lot of money on them. But you guys keeping track of that, some vehicles might have to go out a little earlier, some a little later, but by keeping track of that, we're going to be able to see that savings in the city budget. We're going to be able to see that savings from you guys, the way you handle that, like you've done with Farmers Insurance Group for many years. And I'm just saying, I reach out to all the other council people and the mayor and the city saying we've done business with you and you guys are fantastic. And the 20 years I was there, we use you guys exclusively for all of our customer base too. But I do appreciate you coming forward with this with the city.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilmember Holman.
Yes, Mr. Holman.
I have a couple of questions. The first one would be for Mr. Icky. In your initial presentation, sir, you talked about our current costs through the VERP program. Does that account, or did that sheet account for the resale of the vehicles when we do rotate them out of the fleet from an ownership standpoint versus going to a fully leased vehicle program? Because at some point we wouldn't have vehicles to sell anymore. They'd all be leased, obviously handled by Enterprise right now, whereas right now we buy the vehicle, we use it, and at some point we sell it. Is that factored into your equation?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And additionally, there will be some vehicles that we will always own, the large dump trucks, as well as the bucket truck, street sweeper, and several others that we will always own and want to keep within the VERP, the traditional VERP is what I'll call it, but then within the overall VERP, we'll have that kind of sub-leasing program for the rest of the fleet vehicles.
Okay. And then my second question was, I do have a little bit of experience with fleet leases, both as an end user and from a department representative standpoint, not with Enterprise, but with a couple of other companies. So one of my questions was, we typically had, the managing company obviously has an initial oversight if a vehicle needs, say, a new transmission. And then you make a decision as to whether or not you're going to replace that transmission or dump that vehicle and get a new one because the cost is too high. Is there a two-factor override in this? Is this decision all made by Enterprise, or will there also be a local fleet manager that's one of our employees that makes that decision in conjunction with Enterprise?
That's a great question. So we have a national service department in St. Louis that has over 200 ASE certified technicians. Their only job is to interact with the Goodyears, the Firestones, the Ford, Chevy, Ram dealerships of the world, and to determine if, should we replace this vehicle or should we repair it? And if we have different thresholds, and we can set City of Raymore's threshold to be whatever dollar amount you choose, but Our national average is $750. So any repair that is projected to cost more than $750, we'll ask the municipality that we're working with, hey, do you want to repair this? Here's our recommendation. Which way would you like to go? So that way, if something needs a new transmission and it's not, worth repairing, then, we may just replace it and order a new one.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Berenson, did you have something, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I saw in the slide presentation that there were several other municipalities and cities that looked like they were using this program. Have we had the opportunity to reach out to them and gotten any feedback from them on how this program works for their city and if it's saving them money and how well it's working for them, I guess?
Yes, I have had conversations with a number of the cities, including, and just kind of looking at the sheet, Prairie Village, Lenexa, the Olathe School District, as well as Branson, all have had very positive experiences, spoke very highly of it, and have used a variety of different components within the overall enterprise program. And just to kind of give you like a kind of a global look, Enterprise offers things like the coverage for insurance, the upfitting and the decaling, as well as a number of other risk management things. And so there are a number of items that within the program we will not be taking advantage of that some of these other cities may have. But of the kind of the three major items, most all of these cities were taking advantage of and we're very, very pleased with.
Thank you, Mike. Do you know how long this program has been in place, or how long has Enterprise been doing this for municipalities?
60 years. So we have been we started as a leasing company, and then our rent-a-car side became the massive conglomerate that it is today. But we actually started as an executive leasing company in St. Louis, Missouri. So we've been partnered with municipalities for 60 years across, started in St. Louis, but.
And I do just want to follow up real quickly, in speaking with the other cities, what was more important, at least for me, in putting this together was speaking with all of the department heads here, not, speaking with, Public Works Director, Police Chief, Development Services, and getting not only the insight from them about what they need on a fleet standpoint, but I know there was even one meeting where I specifically asked them, I want you to come with questions that'll poke holes in this. I want you to find reasons to not like this program so that we ensure that we're doing our due diligence. And every meeting, I think, our folks came away with, that this was going to be a positive program for the city as a whole.
Thank you.
I would add to that, Mayor and council members, that I went into this instructing them when I learned that this was the direction that Mr. Icky and all of our department heads were going to be taking. It was, you're going to have to convince me to get over the hump, because as you all know, one of the first things I'm going to be looking at is the dollars, and I can get the stars in my eyes because of the savings, but there's a lot more to it. And one of the items that I was very impressed with when you think about it, and it's an intangible associated with this, is we change make and models quite often to adapt to ongoing situations. And we do that sometime while we do our due diligence and our research. If we're going to have to change something out, there's a great deal of department head being kind of out in the blind when they're trying to decide on what's best for our next fleet move. Now we have an expert partner that's been doing it, as was said, for 60 years. They kind of know the market, they know how the market is changing, and they'll be a good second voice with our department heads in making recommendations to me if we are going to be changing a style or a make of a vehicle that we're using. So kind of an intangible plus to go with the program as well.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have any questions? Anything additional? Okay.
Nothing more.
All right, thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Brandon, thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Our next item is the COVID-19 response and reopening plan. I'll turn that over to Mr. Fearborn, and I assume Mr. Murdoch as well.
I will let Mr. Murdoch begin this particular item.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to share with the council tonight just a brief update on the COVID-19 response throughout not only the state of Missouri, but then also here locally. And then Mr. Fearborn is going to follow up with some more specifics for you, or if you have other questions, we certainly would be happy to answer them. So as you all know, today is the first day for the state of Missouri with the eased restrictions relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. Last week, and actually probably even a few days before last week, the Cass County Health Department had put together a group of representatives from the various jurisdictions throughout the county to talk about how we wanted to move forward in relation to easing some of the restrictions that had been in place throughout the state of Missouri. Ultimately, this group landed on following the governor's guidelines for reopening. There was a lot of healthy debate around that particular decision, but for consistency's sake, especially among our citizens and the numbers throughout Cass County, the health department made the decision to follow the guidelines of the governor. And while this might be a little bit repetitive, I think it is important to go over just a couple of those things because there are or is quite a bit of confusion probably with the number of different guidelines that are going on throughout the state, especially in our area where you have Kansas City being different than Jackson County right now, Jackson County being different than all the surrounding counties. So under the governor's guidelines and what we're following here in Cass County, we do have capacity restrictions in place for retail businesses that are based on their square footage. We do have restaurants that are allowed to open provided they can maintain social distancing within their dining room and patio seating. We are recommending signage for businesses to post so that they can identify what their restricted capacity is for customers that are coming into the stores. And while you can hold gatherings throughout Cass County right now, your social gathering must abide by those social distancing guidelines of 6 feet. Per the governor's guidelines, we did make the decision as well to keep playground equipment closed. That was a part of the Show Me Recovery recommendation as well, to keep any of that playground equipment, high contact, high traffic area should remain closed. So we did make that decision among our Parks Department. As some of you might also be aware, schools on the local level are now allowed to make their own decisions regarding how they're going to approach summer school and then their fall semester. Many are also making recommendations and plans to get items back to students that are still in buildings currently. I also wanted to share with you a little bit of data because I think numbers do become obviously very important in this. As of 2 p.m. today, Missouri is up to 8,754 cases. Cass County is held steady, though, at 64 confirmed cases, and Raymore is currently at 10 confirmed cases, and we have not seen a confirmed case within Raymore since April 16th. About 70% of all cases in Missouri are in the St. Louis area, in a 4-county area there in St. Louis, is about 70% of all the cases, and almost 80% of all of the deaths within Missouri from this pandemic have also been in the St. Louis area. Right now, Missouri has now tested about 95,000 people in the state, and that capacity continues to increase. It's just whether or not some people are going to take advantage of that. I know that there are still people who are looking to get tested, and they are starting to ease some of those restrictions for allowing people to be tested. I think it's important, even though as we start to ease some of these restrictions, that the public still understand that we still need to be taking precautionary measures as people are going out and about. It's not something where we all should be going and grouping together in huge groups immediately or anything like that. There still is, this is still a very serious situation, and we need to be following those guidelines and taking those measures as we go out and about and try to return to some sense of normalcy throughout our city. Just within the city of Raymore, I think it's important that you know that each department did meet with what we kind of call our COVID team to discuss those reopening needs. So the Parks Department, the Public Works, and everybody else met with us to go over the needs that they might have or any requests that they have as they start to get their employees back out into the community as we open up a lot of the city services again. That committee will continue to meet, meaning the COVID committee will continue to meet here and discuss any data or adjust our response as necessary. As you might expect, the police department, due to the nature of their jobs and the department itself, has developed a very robust and detailed plan kind of separate from the city to protect their officers and how they will go about doing their day-to-day jobs during this reopening phase. And I spoke to Chief Zimmerman today, and obviously don't hesitate to contact her if you have any questions regarding the detailed plan that the police department put together. She'd be more than happy to answer those. We also have multiple members of staff that are working right now on the different assistance programs that have been offered, and we'll be doing that all the way throughout this emergency declaration. That probably means all the way through the entire year 2020. And this will include those formal applications for FEMA assistance, state assistance, and then also making sure that we are working with the county as they receive funds as well. The last couple of things, we have developed policies and procedures for our city facilities, programs, and services to accommodate any of these restrictions that we might have to be following or that we will need to follow. And we'll continue to review those prior to the governor's new order. As you probably are aware, this current order will expire May 31st. And so then phase 2, provided that the numbers are still looking good within the state of Missouri, phase 2 would go into effect June 1st. And those final guidelines are still being developed at the state level. Emergency management and the police department are going to be using this kind of time period throughout the late spring and summer to create an emergency reserve of supplies for the city to have should it be necessary, especially as we go into the fall and winter next year if we do happen to have the second wave that many experts and medical professionals are predicting. We want to make sure that we have all of the necessary supplies and that we're not caught needing to try to acquire those things kind of the way we were here during this first wave. So that's kind of what we're doing from a city level. And like I said, Mr. Fearborn is going to probably add to that a little bit, but if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
You want to open up for questions first?
Well, I can go ahead and dovetail off of that real quick. Mr. Murdoch had indicated that we are getting a list of supplies together. I have asked that that list of supplies be divided into 2 different groups. One would be literally an emergent, if we have a reemergence of this particular crisis type situation, that there be supplies on hand for the emergency component of this, and that those would basically be kept secured and stored here at City Hall in case we have a reemergence of the COVID-19 phenomena. The second component of that is addressing what is called the new normal here at City Hall and in the rest of our departments, and that is if people feel more comfortable wearing masks, if people need gloves, if people need whatever supplies they feel they need moving forward on a day-to-day basis, because items that are needed for the emergency would need to be coming out of our emergency management budget. Items that are normal supplies that are addressing this new normal would be coming out of an administration budget, would be 2 different deals. For those day-to-day supplies that are being ordered separate and apart, we would need to make sure that we had some sort of a checkout system. We have a checkout system now for items that are in our supply closet, but this would be a little bit different than that. So we would want to make sure that we're keeping track of those, that our employees at all times feel like we are providing them with the necessary equipment to keep them safe. That's addressing that particular issue on Mr. Murdoch's part. We did open for business at City Hall. I will tell you, I know that a lot of our folks felt relieved for the first time to be able to come to City Hall and not have to unlock the door to get in. It was there were smiles on a lot of folks' faces. We had a significant number of the public come in using our windows. All of the windows but court had somebody at them at one point or another today. Some folks were in masks. We have signage on the front of the building, as you could see from the handout that I sent to you all, asking people that if they had masks to wear them, but for sure to provide social distancing. Everybody was great. People who were in here, they were in great moods. I heard a lot of thank yous for being back open. And it went very, very smoothly today. People were doing what they needed to do. Our employees, for the most part, came in this morning, and first thing they did was report. Right behind me over here, there's actually a temperature taking station, so they can voluntarily come in, and we're asking them to take their temperatures ahead of time before they start their days. All of that, we don't want them coming in early to do that. Come in at 8 o'clock if you show up at 8 o'clock and get your temperature taken. Those are probably two of the most significant items that we have been doing for our employees. As of today, you can see the rest of the items within the two outlines. You can see what we're going to be doing. We had kind of an all-employee meeting on Friday, and it was kind of shocking. From other departments, there were a lot of questions about Parks and Recreation. A number of our employees obviously live here in the city, so they wanted to know what was going to be opening up and when over there. So I also wanted to include that for you all's review as well. And at this point, we would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anyone?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Townsend.
Yes.
I had a general question, Mr. Firborn. I see where the Missouri has kind of released the funds from the CARES Act to the counties. One, how much of that would we receive, and could that be used to kind of supplement the purchase of those protective PPE gear that you were speaking of earlier?
It absolutely can be, and Mr. Murdoch is tracking that very closely. We are very glad that those funds were distributed to the county rather than to Mark, because we were very worried that if they had gone to Mark, they may have gotten lost on other emergencies. Here, I feel like it'll be much more targeted. My initial understanding of those funds is that they cannot be used to offset lost revenues, but can most certainly be used in a very liberal sense to offset expenses that are associated with it, such as the PPE that you're talking about, Councilmember.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Barber, got a question.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the outline because, like Mr. Murdoch said in the beginning, there's a lot of dates floating around, and it's nice to kind of have the steps that we're taking as a city and a county. I appreciate you and staff putting that together. One of the things that caught my eye, this looks like it's our last Zoom meeting, so we'll be meeting in person, and I guess we'll get kind of briefed on how we're going to do that. Looks like it's going to be at center view, and we'll do social distancing, but well, the questions are would you like us?
You cut out a little bit there, Kevin. What was that last part?
Oh, I asked, should we wear a mask to our meetings?
If you are comfortable wearing a mask, wear a mask, sir.
Are you comfortable seeing me in a mask?
I've seen a lot of people the last few weeks in masks.
Yeah, the way they had the room set up, you guys didn't get to see it, but initially we were going to have these meetings at Centerview with social distancing, and then at the last second, you guys stayed at home and we did the Zoom meeting. But the way they had it set up over there was really nice. I mean, it was much more than 6 feet apart, and we used the entire room, the entire Centerview area for our meeting, and I feel very comfortable. I probably will not wear a mask. I wear a mask when I go into the stores, but I probably won't for that meeting because I think that the program that they're using here with their maintenance personnel and cleaning, they're very thorough with it. And, before and after that meeting, it'll be thoroughly cleaned, and it'll be a nice, safe environment. So it's really your comfort level for any of you. If you wish to wear one, fine. If not, we'll all be comfortable with that, I think. Mr. Holman.
Thank you, sir. 2 questions. One, can I borrow Councilmember Townsend's mask for the meeting, the one that he had at the beginning of this meeting, or perhaps Councilmember Burke's? And so I don't know if that was okay. But no, the real question was, Mr. Firborn, I know it's a little bit early. You had discussed with us earlier some dates on what you thought revenue projections being up, being down in some sectors. overall impact to us, and then maybe, factoring in a little bit more cost on some, obviously the PPE and that kind of stuff. Basically, I didn't know if you had any current updated information on our finances.
I will have a better projection of, as I had said during the first one, I'll have a better idea on the impact once the hoarding revenues that did offset and more than offset the loss of sales tax from dining in, but that with those leveled off, I will know tolerably well on the 15th of this month to be able to report back to you on what my new revenue projections are going to be. Interestingly enough, those will be through the month of April, and that will be a very good time to be reporting that to you because we will be exactly halfway through our fiscal year. As far as the expenses that are concerned with it, that component is going to depend on what expenses we have actually had, if those expenses are directly reimbursable, and that may become a non-issue for us because we're tracking them very carefully. So if I can be cautiously optimistic that our revenues will drop no less than 2% and we can receive a significant component of the expense reimbursement from the county, we may get out of this thing in good shape.
Thank you, sir.
One of the concerns that I do have is that Mr. Fearborn did share with me last Friday, and I would like to share that with the council, is that the delinquency in our utilities is very alarming. And hopefully with the economy reopening, people feel more comfortable with paying their past utility bills, trash, water, sewer. So those things have grown exponentially with what's occurred over the last 2 months, and it's a fairly large number, and so it is concerning. So hopefully our collections will be better now that people might feel a little more comfortable with making payments on those. And I know that we even talked about our folks at the window, even if they call in, attempting to work with those people and making arrangements so that it's not a big chunk. Do you want to comment on that, Jim?
Well, that was actually going to be part 3, sir, so you give me a great segue.
Right,
thank you.
sorry.
As the mayor has indicated, we are significantly down in our revenues. We know who those persons are and how much they owe. I will tell you it is in 6 figures. That was bound to happen when we told people. It's a combination of people not being able to pay and people who know that if they don't pay. Last month, we were under the governor's order that we could not send out any sort of notices that we would be shutting off their water. So there was nothing we could actually do. We are now out from under the governor's order, and we are beyond the 30-day time frame that I requested of the council not to turn people's water off. So it will be my intention, unless I hear otherwise from the council, to send out shut-off notices to our customers, along with, we've been working with other Encode communities, that's our billing group. We've been working with other communities across the nation on a very nicely worded letter that tells them, here's your shut-off notice, but come in, we'll make any type of an arrangement that we need to. If you can show us that you have the inability to make payment on this bill, I can tell you from the list that there are a significant number of folks who are on Raymore's list who could actually be making payments on those bills. I know that we have some commercial businesses that are not making payments right now, who are in business and wide open. So we will be sending those letters out before the end of this week to people, asking them to get in here and make payment if they can, or make arrangements if they cannot make payments right now. And we're going to be much more liberal than we usually are, up to a year, making monthly payments to get back in good stead with us as far as getting those payments concerned. But right now it's a pretty high and alarming number. The entire number goes to the enterprise fund, so the general fund is not impacted by those. But there are still, I mean, the enterprise fund is still an operating fund that we have to pay salaries out of. The one piece of good news associated with it is we did hear from Kansas City Water that they would be suspending their proposed price increase to their wholesale customers for at least 6 months. So that would have normally gone into effect on the 15th of this month, so we won't have to worry about that component at least.
Mr. Burke, I saw you had your hand up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, obviously, we will, within that letter, send the website information so they can pay online. And since that's such a new thing that we've done to remove those fees right before this all happened, that'll be a good thing to remind people of as well. And I'm sure that's part of your plan.
It's, I believe, the 4th paragraph of the letter, sir, right before we tell them how to get a hold of us.
Anyone else have any input, any questions? Okay, anything else, Mr. Fearborn?
That concludes staff reports this evening, sir.
If no one has anything else, then we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.
Have a good week.
We'll see y'all.
See ya. Have a good evening.
Good night.